Canada is the third largest hub in the world for the aerospace industry. There's not enough financial group to support them. So you need to have sectoral expertise.
Milad, thank you so much for being here.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me, Antoine.
Milad, you and your partners launched Trust Capital, targeting the Canadian aerospace supply chain. That's a very specific sector. What got you interested into the Canadian aerospace supply chain?
Absolutely. So, well, thank you for asking the question. So, well, I guess obviously I'm based in Canada. I'm based in Montreal, and I grew up my whole life in Canada. And as I kept on working in the industry, in the finance industry, the transactional industry, I got involved into the aerospace industry. And with experience, my partners and I realized that the Canadian aerospace industry was not well served by the financial players. To give you context, Canada is the third largest hub in the world for the aerospace industry. The Canadian aerospace industry is the first Canadian industry that exports the most out of any other industry in Canada, and houses hundreds of thousands of jobs. So there's a huge market here. And historically, the US and Europe, specifically France, had a very well developed financial system to support the industry, partially because of Airbus in France and Boeing in the US. And historically, we had Bombardier in Canada, where the whole supply chain evolved around them and around Bombardier, but around a lot of other companies. So there's hundreds and thousands of SMEs in Canada that work in this industry. But like I mentioned, as we evolved, we've realized that there's not enough financial group to support them specifically. And fundamentally, we believe that to be successful in aerospace, you need to have sectoral expertise. And the financial institution and the financial group that were in place in Canada didn't have that financial expertise. So we saw an opportunity, and we thought, if no one's going to cover it, let's do it ourselves.
And you were working in, you had a very good position in EY. Were you doing something similar? I mean, do you feel like you had a lot of transferable skills from working there and now having your own venture capital?
Absolutely. And just to clarify, Antoine, we're a private equity firm, which is not exactly the same thing as a venture capital. A venture capital, they invest in early stage startups, where a private equity firm invests in established businesses. Oftentimes, they have 20, 30, 40-year history. And sometimes it's more of a succession, baby boomers, people in the 60s, 70s that either want to sell part of their business or all of their business. So we really focus on that part of the financial ecosystem. But to get back to your original question, I feel like my whole career after university and including university was all stepping stones to get me to where I am right now. And the skills that I got were mostly all transferable. So in private equity, what we do is that we invest in businesses. So there's a big financial and transactional aspect to it. There's a lot of other ones like the operational investment thesis, the due diligence, tax, environment, everything. But my specific expertise relates to financial and transactional M&A. My previous job before I started Trust Capital Partners at Ernst& Young was merger and acquisition advisory. So my job was to advise entrepreneurs how to buy or sell businesses. So that skill set that I got there was definitely transferable. And before Ernst& Young, I was working at NovaCap, which is one of Canada's largest private equity firms. So I was pretty junior at that time, but a lot of what I learned in terms of best practice and how you organize the purchase of a transaction, all of that were useful to me when I started Trust Capital Partners. And frankly, we've inspired ourselves a lot from some of the things we've seen in the past, because when you don't want to reinvent the wheel, right? There's a very good process in place. So you take it and you make it a bit your own. And our biggest differentiator is our aerospace expertise. There's a lot of private equity groups in Canada and North America, around the world, but there's very few where the partners around the table know the industry as well as we do. And when we talk to the entrepreneurs, that really makes a difference for them.
You know, you're a co-founder. You have partners, which means, and we're talking about high stakes here. These are very large. It's a very large industry, very large investments. So my question to you is, when stakes are so high and you have difference of opinion with your partners, your co-founders, how do you resolve these issues? What kind of strategies do you guys have in place to make sure that you're always aligned and you can move forward past any difference of opinion?
Absolutely, and that's you're asking a very good question. So the way we're structured right now, we have two different level of partnerships. The first one is me and my two partners, Benoit and Frederick. And what's working for us is that we're very complementary. Benoit is an operations guy, Fred's a strategy guy, I'm a financial guy, and our skill set is complementary. It doesn't mean that I don't have an opinion on the other subject or they don't have an opinion on my subject, but there's a lot of trust involved. You know, when you start a partnership, your partners, it's like getting married because you're basically married financially with them, but you're also married with regard to all of the investment. And in my marriage, I don't take a big decision without consulting with my wife before. Well, it's the same thing with my partners. In any of our files, in any of our projects, we confer with each other and we take a decision collectively. Um, you know, maybe it's going to be different in the future, but up to now, there was no instance when we had to take a vote. You know, we have legal documents that if there's divergence of opinion, then we take it to a vote and it's two against three and all of that. But I believe that if you have to get there, that there's a fundamental issue. If I want to do something and I'm not able to convince my partners that this is the right thing to do, then I have to ask myself, well, am I really doing the right thing? And same for them. So that's the first level of the partnership. But we, on top of that, we also have a very deep and knowledgeable advisory committee. And I want to talk about the team a bit more after, but they bring decades of experience. So whenever we want to make a big investment, we actually have to go see them, present the project, and they get to approve or decline. So that's the way we structure ourselves. So in terms of governance, we're pretty well set up. So at any project that we go forward, we're getting the approval of multiple levels of the governance structure.
Milad, I'm curious a bit about you mentioning the importance of the team. So I'm curious about the profiles that you look for, people you want to onboard, because you kind of rely on them. If you have a strong team, you have a strong company, they'll advise you the right way. So do you feel like it's the same people you used to hire when you were working at EY, the same profiles, or do you look at something completely different?
Yeah, so I think the answer is it depend on the role we're looking at. Right now, we're a new fund. The fund itself, in terms of financial commitment, was launched in June 2022, but we've been working on this project since 2018. So right now, the profile of the partnership is very diverse. You know, operation, strategy, finance. In terms of what I'm looking for, let's say as a new hire, as an analyst, I'm looking more for someone with financial backgrounds. Why? Because there's a lot of work involved into financial modeling, into building presentation, into building due diligence in the context of doing an acquisition. And we really need people to help us and take off a workload from us in that. The operational and the strategy, we're pretty well covered right now in the partnership with Benoit and Frederick. So we don't feel like we need someone else. Now, as the team grows and as the fund grows, uh, when we go from like, 4 employees to 20 employees, that's probably going to change. At the moment, right now, what we need is more junior hands to help us in the day-to-day work. So when I was at Ernst& Young, we were looking for young people with a couple of years of experience, either accounting or finance, that also are doing some type of certification and being very ambitious. So I would say that today at Trust Capital Partner, this is also the type of profile I'm looking for the immediate needs, and it will change with time.
I want to talk a bit about the industry itself. So it obviously faced a lot of disruptions. We're talking supply chain, sustainability pressures. What trends do you think are shaping the future of the aerospace sector? I mean, if we're looking long term over the next decade.
Yeah, I think the biggest trend we're seeing right now is the shift in power between the clients and the suppliers. So I want to say that pre-COVID, and it's been a while now, the clients also always had the biggest leverage. So, we want you to send us this amount of pieces at this price, and the suppliers really either they would say yes, they would reduce the prices, or the clients would find someone else. Now, since COVID, with a lot of employees retiring, with a shortfall in the labor force, there's a lot of problem in the supply chain. The supply chain is at capacity. It needs a lot of investment, so it can't produce the required output. And what happens now is that the supplier actually have some leverage because they can afford to say no to some client. And clients, especially the large OEMs in tier one, they're not used to being told no. But when you have a limited capacity and you could either give it to this client or this client or this client, why would you reduce your prices, or why would you do something that is very inefficient for your specific plant when you could actually just shift it around? If you're trying to grow and you have extra capacity, that's one thing. You can accommodate a lot of your client base. But when you have a capacity shortfall, you can be a bit more selective. So I think that was the short and medium term trend after COVID. And I think now the whole supply chain is kind of adapting to that. A lot of people realized during COVID that they were unsustainable. Their pricing structure wasn't good enough. They didn't have a healthy balance sheet. They had too much debt. They would do investment too quickly to support clients without a great business case. And I think people are becoming more and more cautious because when COVID hit and people lost 50, 60, 70% of their sales, well, they had to do massive layoff. They had to close plant. They had to do a bunch of things. So as time goes forward, I think people are going to be a lot more strategic and a lot more cautious in their investment decision, even if it might not respond to all of the client's needs.
Do you
So I
feel
think
like
that's
did you feel like the government is aware of these changes? And do you have like any kind of relationship with the government? As someone who's so invested in the industry and the industry, which is highly regulated,
mhm.
do you have a back and forth with the government?
I, yes, not as much as we'd like to, but we do send messages once in a while. Actually, I was in Paris during the last week for the Paris Air Show, which is a global air show every year that alternates between Paris and London. And the Prime Minister of Quebec, François Legault, was there. The Minister of Economy, Mélanie Joly, at the Canadian level was there. And the Minister of Economy, Christine Fréchette, at the Quebec level was there as well. So we got the chance to talk to them briefly. But that definitely shows the involvement and the support of the different level of governments towards the aerospace industry. And to give you a context, I think it's the first time in 10 years that a prime minister came to the to those one of those air shows. So you're seeing that there's more and more government involvement and government support for the industry. Um, and in the context where defense in Canada, we didn't historically do a lot of defense. And with the worldwide context of what's happening, the various war, the relationship with the United States, Canada is wanting to become more and more independent. So there's going to be a massive investment in defense, and the governments are getting more involved. The governments are very aware of the problems in the supply chain in the aerospace industry, but also the the dynamic in the global market. The reality is that you have two giants in the market, it being Airbus and Boeing, which are French and American, not Canadian, and we want to produce as many pieces, components, sub assemblies for those planes as possible in Canada and Quebec. We purchase a lot of those planes. We purchase the government invest in um, in fighter jet, but also non-fighting aircraft. So when we do those investments, we want to make sure that there's a direct repercussion on the market where some of that value is produced in Canada as well. So we need to ensure that we're getting the part of the piece that uh, that Canada can do because we have the skill set to do all of that. So I think they're very well aware. They're very responsive to the industry's plea. I think that aerospace and defense in Canada over the past decades wasn't seen as a top security industry or national security industry like in the US and France. So they had a lot more significant involvement from the government than Canada historically, but I think that's probably going to change for the benefit of Canada.
The fact that you started this years ago, would you call it luck, or would you think it was a highly educated guess and it was inevitable to get into that direction?
Well, I wouldn't say that it was inevitable for the defense investment in Canada, but I think when you just talk about aerospace in general, and let's talk about either private jets or commercial aerospace, I think that was very well educated. So a lot of people, because of the timing of our fund, thinks that we started the fund because of COVID to leverage the opportunity of the recovery. But as I've mentioned before, we actually started in 2018, my partners and I, because we believed in the macro. As the world GDP increases, the middle class becomes larger and people are going to travel more. You know, people are going to want to go see the pyramids in Egypt. People are going to want to go to Hawaii or in the south on the beach. They're going to want to go visit New Zealand or Iceland. You know, as the GDP increases, there's an almost direct correlation with numbers of flights around the world. So I like to say that a rising tide lifts all boats. So we fundamentally believe in the macroeconomy of the industry. I think what was lucky for us is that the timing of COVID, where I think if we would have started before COVID, our investment, we would have spent a few years where our investment would have been at a negative value and would be working hard in um, realigning them and restructuring the businesses. So as we started the fundraising, or as we wanted to start the fundraising of our fund, COVID hit. So we put the project on pause. And then maybe 6 months after COVID, that's when we reinitiated our discussion with the Quebec government for support in our fund. Actually, the Quebec government, through Investissement Québec, invested 30 million in our fund. Our fund today is at 82 million. So they're the largest investors. So you could definitely tell that they're supporting the industry indirectly or even directly via us. But yeah, we're being lucky in the timing where a lot of those businesses during COVID, unfortunately, lost a lot of value. We're coming in, helping them either by infusing capital in the business or buying some shareholders that want to retire. And we're having a great period of recovery for the aerospace industry where there's a lot of demand for planes. The worldwide fleet, which is about 25,000 aircrafts around the world, is getting older, so it needs maintenance. It needs some aircraft to be replaced. So in 2018, we believed in the macro, and right now we believe in the industry even more due to the recent recovery.
And I want to ask a bit about a personal question. I want to jump onto you for a second. You're a board member in two companies, and I've talked to so many founders and CEOs over the last couple of months. And for some of them, I see they have a lot of positions, like 4, 5, 6 positions. And I wonder, how do you prioritize and how do you manage your time? Do you, how can you be efficient in all these positions simultaneously? Do you have a strategy in place?
Um, Work-life balance, and your question, I believe, was a bit more about how do you prioritize work versus other work. But if you can let me, I'll be a bit more general and just say that work-life balance in general has been the biggest challenge of my life. It's You can always try to be equal between work and your family, and I have three young kids, by the way, and my wife when I quit my job, my wife told me the next day that no, sorry, not the next day, the next month that she was pregnant. So it all came together. So it was a big challenge. But I believe you can't have work-life balance all the time. You have to have work-life balance over time. So there's a periods where I'm going to focus a lot more on work because I have deliverable, because I have big projects, and there's other periods where I'm going to focus a lot more on my family. And within work, which was your question, um, we're a small team. We're three, very complementary. We have an analyst as well. So at the end of the day, if we don't get the work done, no one's going to do it. So you're going to have to work hard, work a lot of hours. Building a new fund, it's basically building a startup. We started from scratch, from not having any money to invest, not having any structure, not having a life insurance, health insurances, or cell phone plan, and you had to build all of that. So you do it step by step. You prioritize the most important thing that also have an immediate impact, and then you just try to take the best decision as efficiently as possible. Uh, I am a board member of the two investment platforms we have so far, which is DCM in Quebec and Deshawn in Ontario. For me, it doesn't take a lot of my time. Why? Because we're extremely involved in the businesses. We're not a passive fund, we're a very active fund. So I talk to the CEO and the CFO of the business almost every day, sometimes every week. Uh, so once we get to the board, there's nothing that I don't already know. So the boards become either very, the purpose of the board becomes a reason, a governance, uh, has a governance prospect because you have to vote on certain things. You got to approve the budget. You got to do a bunch of other things. But also in DCM, we have external members. So it becomes also a reporting exercise for those external members who are also tasked by some shareholder to make sure that the governance is in place. So when you're efficient on a day-to-day basis with your business and you're very involved with them, once you get to the board level, then it doesn't take a lot of your time because you are already aware of everything that's happening. It becomes hard when you're always catching up, right? So if you're always behind on everything, you don't have the right team around you, and then you have a board next week and you have no idea what's happening, you're in catch-up mode, and that's where it becomes hard. So I try to always stay up to date on all of my files. And if we become too overwhelmed because we have 3, 4, 5 files at the same time, then we have to select and then select what are the most probable potential investments for us or the ones that can bring the most value to our fund. And sometimes it's not that we're saying no to some investment; it's just telling them, you know what, we have we have conflicts right now in terms of our bandwidth. So we'd love talking to you. We'd love to continue those discussion about your business, but let's touch point in 2-3 months after we're done this transaction or after we're done something specific. And most of the time, people understand. Um, when it becomes challenging is if it's an auction process. And for context, when you buy a business, you could either have a one-on-one with the entrepreneur, where you know the entrepreneur, and that's one of our strengths because we are aerospace. We're very involved in the industry. We know most of the Canadian players. We know a lot of players around the world as well. So you have touch points regularly, either at events, at Paris, like I just had, so you can have those one-on-one discussion with them, and there's no real timeline. When it's a competitive auction process, the entrepreneur hired a broker to sell his business. My previous job at Ernst& Young, I was one of those broker. And then you have a specific timeline. You have deadlines. At this specific date, you got to submit an expression of interest. At this specific date, well, you get the data room, and then you get to do a due diligence. At this specific date, there's a letter of intent that's due, and then a target closing date. So we had to decline some of those processes in the past because of lack of bandwidth, but you can't stretch too thin. I prefer doing a couple of things very well than doing 10 things or a lot of things not as well.
Yeah, I mean, now it sounds they're just natural addition to your job. They're not extras. Um, and we're really out of time, but I just want to squeeze in one more question. That
Yeah.
it's about AI. I have to ask you. How much do you think about it? How much is it incorporated in your process and the way you look at different businesses? Do you think it's going to impact the industry as a whole, or do you think it's a late mover in the aerospace industry?
Um, I think it's going to have a tremendous effect on the industry, but I think we need to be very smart about it. I've already know a lot of businesses that are involving AI in their business. For example, tracking the quality of certain pieces of certain process, tracking, or even um, answering, like those chatbots, or answering emails, or preparing invoices automatically. So the people that are incorporating technology in their workflow are gaining efficiency. Now, in my job, when I'm looking at investment, we don't use it that much because we want to really be involved and knowing the information ourselves. A lot of our advisors use AI in various ways, but I think we're really at the beginning of AI. And some people have a hard time trusting the output. So I think in the next decade, it's going to evolve exponentially. And that's probably going to have a lot more concrete impact on how we do the job, either at the investment level, their processes, the operations, the manufacturing, or even at us at our level at the fund, how we track reporting. Maybe AI is going to be able to connect to the ERP of our investment and generate reports themselves. So I think it will have an impact, but we're very far from being able to um, to use it fully. And in the aerospace industry, unfortunately, we're behind 2, 3 generation in terms of, before doing AI, well, you should do Industry 4.0. Before doing Industry 4.0, you should do automation. So a lot of companies are still, using paper for everything, not using robots for certain things that could be much improved. So I think there's a lot of catch up to do. And a fund like us is going to help our investment and our partners implementing some of those new technologies.
You had 3 kids, co-founder of a private equity firm, board member in 2 other companies, yet I still managed to squeeze 20 minutes with you. Thank you so much for taking the time. Really appreciate it. It was a fascinating conversation.
I'm very honored, and I'm available anytime. Thank you, Antoine. It's very much appreciated.
Thanks.